was about 33 years ago that we became parents. And it was very soon after the birth of Aaron that it became clear to me that there was one thing that I feared more than anything else in the world. And that was simply this: if I couldn't find him when I was looking for him. Of course, the older they get, the more that becomes reality. I mean, when they're in a crib, they're not going far. When they're out crawling around on the living room floor, they might hide under a table, knowingly or unknowingly. But you take them out shopping the first time and, you know, you're holding on to them with this death grip, hoping that they don't see a toy and run down this aisle or go over to that aisle. And I thought, that first time where you have them at your side, and you're looking at something and you look back and they're not there. You remember that? I mean, I think probably every parent has experienced that. And it's like, oh my gosh, where are they? You know, and you just hit this mild state of panic because your child is not where they should be. We've gone through 26 chapters. And I think if you remember that, you understand what God felt through pretty much all of Scripture. My child has scooted down the other aisle, has run away, and I have no idea where they're at. Well, of course, God knew where we were at, but the child wanted to run. And it was that separation. For those of us in the world, that separation, you think of all the horrible things that could happen. Only to find out that they're down looking at the lower shelf because that's where they put the little toys and they could see them. But God feels that same ache, that same pain when we become separated from Him. And the whole story that we have looked at has been nothing more than God looking for us and trying to reconnect with us. We understand what that must feel like. Yeah, God has lost children. His children have gone in the wrong direction. His children, those who have grown up in the church, who were kept so close to Him, move away to college or get out on their own, and they realize, oh, I can do this. Mom and Dad aren't watching. Yet God is. And that ache that God feels is painful. So God had a strategy to get us back. First He tried with the children of Israel. And we saw that roller coaster ride, didn't we? We know it. Sometimes Israel did really, really good. And sometimes they were the biggest goof-ups in the world. And then God tried something else. God sent Himself in the form of a human being, in the person of Jesus Christ to earth, to show us what it was like, to show us that love. We went through just a few weeks ago the story of Jesus' ministry and then into the time where He was crucified. God was willing to do anything at all, even to sacrifice His Son, so that you and I could be reconnected as He originally intended. Now we get to part 3. It was Israel, then it was Jesus, and now God is saying, okay, guys, don't worry. I'm still going to be with you. But now in the person of the Holy Spirit. So we're in that third phase, and we're coming into that now, and we'll be in that for a few weeks. And I want us to be able to just kind of grasp that, what that must have been like for the first disciples. I was so excited a few weeks ago when I watched that video, and I heard Randy talk about the fact that we had they had the house churches, and it wasn't just some mega church of 3,000. It was little bitty house churches of 30. Okay, 33? Thank you. How about that? We're bigger than most of the house churches in the first century. But that's not, don't get me wrong, I'm not gloating at this point. You'll hear that one in a minute. The disciples that had gathered together, the 12, the 11 that had walked with Jesus and heard about Jesus and lived with Jesus, and then Judas to be replaced, and then those that had gathered and followed Jesus but weren't in that inner circle but yet had come around were numbering about 120. And they were waiting. Jesus had told them, just wait. Wait. I'm going to send something. Something you have no idea what it's all about. I don't know about you, but for me, wait is a 4-letter word. I don't want to hear wait. One of the hardest things in the world when I was a kid, when Mama said she was going to bake me cookies, I would sit in the kitchen waiting for the bell to ring on the stove because I knew the cookies were done. But I would wait and wait and wait. It's like, come on, ring the bell. That's how the apostles or the disciples must have felt. They're sitting there in the room, and Jesus said, now just hang on, guys. Just wait a little bit. Seriously? You want me to wait? Come on, look at all we've been through in the last couple months here, Jesus. Wait. Take it easy. Just wait. So they did. They waited until the time of Pentecost. That wasn't a term that was just invented in first century. That was something the Jewish people had been celebrating for centuries. And they got to the point where they said, wait until I send the one that I promised. So Jesus sent the Holy Spirit to the disciples. And He was poured out on them. We sit there and we go back and we read in Acts chapter 2, it says, on the day of Pentecost, 7 weeks after Jesus was resurrected, the believers were meeting together in one place, and suddenly a sound from heaven like the roar of a mighty windstorm in the skies above them, and it filled the house where they were meeting. Windows are closed today. Imagine the wind coming in to where they were sitting, to the point where the candles blew out, and they were just out of breath. Because what they had been promised was about to come true. The 120 disciples that had been following Jesus, either in that inner circle or just on, maybe even on the fringes, were about ready to experience something that no one had ever experienced in the life of the world. They were about to become missionaries in a cross-cultural sense. It was not just Jews. It was Jews and Gentiles. It was the Greeks. It was slave and free, men and women. And these followers of Jesus now had the power and the command to to minister to all of them. You go through Acts chapter 2 and you see what was going on. You can see how weird this whole thing was. We see what was going on, and the people around are going like, what in the world are those guys talking about? I mean, Peter gets up and he starts speaking and everybody understands. I was trying to grasp what that must have been like. Then I saw a news report from the United Nations and everybody sitting around, with their headsets on so they can understand what the speaker is saying. Imagine, on a grander scale, thousands of people, and people heard in their language the good news of Jesus Christ. The good news that God loved them. And it wasn't something in Greek or Aramaic. I mean, they heard it in their own language. They understood it. They got the concept. If you're like me, one of the most frustrating things to do when you're watching TV is if you have to depend on closed captioning. You sit there and you're watching and someone's speaking in a language that you don't understand and they've got the little captioning down the bottom and you're following along and reading the words just don't quite get it. You want to understand it. You want to hear it. You want to experience it. And just reading the words, it's like the difference between going face to face and sending somebody a text. It's a huge difference. And yet Jesus is saying, be ready. And what did Jesus say was going to happen? The power of the Holy Spirit was going to come upon, and you were all going to go to church. Right? Oh, I'm sorry. Wait a minute. I missed that one. No, he said it's time to go and be the church. There is a huge difference. God is telling us through the work of the Holy Spirit that your job is not to show up and give me an hour or an hour and a half on Sunday morning and we're done. God says it's time for us to come and not just attend, but to be the church. The first generation church, the church that Peter had and the disciples had seen and experienced after Pentecost was just that type of church. It was people that were doing and being, oh, there's a need, let's take care of it. Oh, we got this over here, let's fine. Let's go handle that one over there. Somebody is hurting, let's come alongside and minister them. It was the job of the whole church. There was no way in the world that Peter and the original disciples could do it all themselves. They were given the task to be the church, to be God's love and His hands and His feet in a world that had never seen anything like that. God's family had disappeared, had walked away. And yet, He says, I want you back. And so He used those who came back first to minister to those that were kind of here, and then here, and then farther out. God is going back and He's getting His family back. He's coming back and getting His children together so they can make an impact on the world. So what's that look like? What does that look like for us? I don't spend a lot of time watching TV preachers. I will admit that. Every once in a while I'll catch one. About a month ago I was up early and I was just kind of flipping on the TV and kind of, I don't really want to watch the the news. I get depressed early enough in the day as it is. I don't want to start off at 6 in the morning doing that. And I turned on a show, and I heard these words. You believe because you have seen. Blessed are those who haven't seen and still believe. You remember that? That was the passage we read just a few moments ago from the Gospel was written by John. Jesus' words to Thomas. Thomas came in doubting it all. And yet I heard those words in a different way this time. You believe because you have seen. Blessed are those who haven't seen and still believe. This is how I heard it. 20-some years ago, this church was out in the country. And somewhere along the line, we got the impression that the minute you move to town, the place is filled. There was no guarantee there. Now, I'm not being critical of anybody who might have said that. I'm just saying there was no guarantee. But we're going to come to town. And we look out, we look at the average attendance that we've got now, and we look at what our average attendance when we were out in the country, and you know what? It's pretty close. And for those of you who were here 25 plus years ago, there may be times where you're sitting there shaking your head and you just go, I don't get it. We moved to town. I didn't see anything about that in here. But this is what I hear God saying to us. And I wish that I could have taken that message that I heard that morning and paused it. I wish I would have been wise enough or awake enough to hit the record button to DVR it. This is what I heard God say. Blessed are those who have believed in me and continue to be faithful in spite of what they see all around them. In spite of the results that we see. I'll let that sink in for a second. God promises us that He is at work. He doesn't promise that we will always see the fruits of our work. And I will tell you right now that if there is one thing that is so frustrating for me, it is that. I want to be able to get out and work hard, and then I want to see the results of my work. And what I hear God saying is, blessed are those who are faithful to me and doing what I ask them to do in spite of the fact that they don't see the results right away. Now, if you don't see that in here, then you can hit me up afterwards. But boy, I want to see that. I don't want to come into church and see 15 people on Sunday morning. I want to be able to come into church and know that we got to set up the chairs in the back. I want 250 people here on Sunday morning, not just at a funeral. Boy, I need to see that sometimes. And sometimes I'm sorry. Because sometimes that's my fault. And I get the impression that we got to do this program and that program, and we've got to come up with this and that and the other thing, and the place will be packed. Not necessarily. We got a few months to go, and we're going to be sending a group of kids to Chick. How many kids have we sent to Chick over the last 20 years? Oh, about 40. How many of them are in the pews right now? None. None. If they lived in the area, how many of them would be here? 3 or 4? Was it worth the thousands of dollars that we spent to send them there? Was it worth the time that you spent as a Sunday school teacher to get the kids ready when they were just wee little things? To teach them the good news? To teach them that God loved them? Even though we don't see them in the pews? Is it worth it? Yeah, it is. Why aren't they here? Oh, probably there's a reason for everyone that's not. Blessed are those that believe who haven't seen. Blessed are those who continue to be faithful to the calling of Jesus Christ when they haven't seen the results. Come on, you farmers understand that better than I do. You prepare the soil, you put the seed in the ground, you do everything you've got to do, and then come the fall, nothing comes up. Really? I bust my tail and there's nothing? I spent this money and there's nothing? I look out and that's how I feel sometimes. That's how some of you feel sometimes because I hear it. All the kids in Sunday school, all the kids at Chick, all the things that we've done in the community. Blessed are those who continue to remain faithful to what I've called them to do, even when they don't see the results. I'm going to say right now that if the results aren't there because of me, I'm sorry. And I will offer that apology to anyone and any group of ones if I need to. But the one thing that I've come to understand is that we are not called to bring about the results. We are called to be faithful and do what God's told us to do. The results are not in my hands. The results are in God's hands. And this third level of the story, I gotta believe it. I gotta believe it. That the results are in God's hands. And if the results are in God's hands, okay. I gotta do what I gotta do. And I gotta leave to God what God's gonna do. We're not here just to do. We're here to be. We be the church in a lot of different ways. And if we're the church, and if we're the vessels that God will use, and we're faithful, that's what God asked us to do. Boy, I don't like hearing it sometimes, but I gotta hear it. And I think we all do. Gracious God, it's your time.